our seats.
She now is a full conductor. Yeah. So this is like her job.
I think I'm going to go ahead and get started because it's a little bit after 6. What is it, like 6:10, something like that? So I want to thank you, ladies. No gentlemen so far. Thank you, ladies, for coming. I really appreciate you taking the time in our cold weather. We was doing so well. Like the temperature went up. We was like, I was running again, and I was like, today it started hailing. So I am excited and nervous all together. Today I was thinking about having written the book. I was on Instagram, I think it was, and somebody commented, oh, I got my book, and I started reading it. And as an author, first you think, oh yeah, I want to share this information, but then when someone says they read it, you're like, I shared stuff. People are gonna know stuff about me. But I did want to share kind of like the journey of writing the book, why I wrote it, why I think it's important information, and then I'll open up to questions, feedback. If anybody has a book and they have questions or have started a program or have questions about, the type of program it is. So MR40 method is the 40-day guide to reset your metabolism, lose weight, and optimize your health. So I called it MR40 because it's a metabolic reset in 40 days. The program is designed to do in 40-day increments. One of the reasons why I wrote this book was a reflection of two things. One, of my own journey in weight loss, and number two, throughout the whole process of learning these techniques, I really thought a lot about my mother. And the fact that she's not here now because I believe that she did not know a lot of things, right? So a story that I share inside of my book is, so my mom, she passed away about 4 years ago. And I say she passed away from the effects of diabetes. But in reality, she really passed away from the effects of ignorance. And not ignorant in a negative way, but literally not knowing. My mom got diabetes, gestational diabetes, when she was pregnant with my little sister, and it just never went away. And throughout the entire process of growing up, so I was 7 when she got gestational diabetes, which bloomed into full-fledged diabetes. She was taking insulin shots multiple times a day. And growing up as a child with a parent with diabetes, it wasn't until I was an adult that I realized that a lot of things that I experienced in my childhood is not really a normal childhood. That's not like, I just assume like everybody goes through this, right? As a kid, you think everybody is having the same experiences you are. But in reality, everybody did not have the same experience that I did. So I learned how to drive a car when I was 13, and this is a story that I share inside of in the introduction of the book. And I learned not because I was just really gung-ho and I had a great mom who was like ready for me to learn at 13. I learned under the instructions that you need to know how to drive a car, because if I ever have a problem with my diabetes, then I need you to be able to drive me to a hospital. And so I didn't learn under, hey, this is fun, let me do something that's going to help me, become more of an adult. I really learned under an obligation to literally have to save my mother's life if I needed to. And I remember one particular occasion where we were going school clothing shopping, which you do, at the beginning of every school year. And I was in the store and I'm looking at, all the great things that I wanted to buy. So my first day of school, I could be fly. I'm aging myself by using the word fly, but that's okay. And my mom didn't look well. So I asked her if she was okay, and she's like, no, she's not. And I had to use that skill that she had recently taught me, which was I had to drive her home. She physically could not see because her sugar had risen so high, and she had forgotten to take her insulin before we left out the door. And so I had to put everything back, and we got in the car, and the whole time driving, she's telling me, don't drive too slow because that's going to bring attention from the police, but don't drive too fast because that's going to bring the attention from the police. And she took me in a particular direction to get home. She's like, just in case if I pass out, you need to take this right and go directly to the emergency room. We got home, and she got her insulin. But that, it really stuck with me for a really long time, that this skill of driving was literally a way of saving my mother's life. And I had to take that great responsibility that if something was to ever happen, that this was a skill that was needed, not that I wanted it. Things like that happened throughout my childhood kind of culminated when my mom had went to the hospital once because her sugar was really high, which was not actually uncommon. We had this frequently throughout my childhood and my adult life. And this particular time, after she left the hospital, the doctors gave her a kind of like the post-care, right? So they sent her to an outpatient where they was teaching her how to manage her diabetes. And they told her you should go to a nutritionist. And I remember this day so clearly because most people in here know that I used to own a personal training studio on Davenport Avenue in New Haven. And I was in my studio, and my mom called me, which she often did when she was, she had this really funny thing where anytime she was in rehab or in the hospital, she loved wearing like my Balance Fitness stuff to tell everybody like her daughter was a health coach. And I'm like, man, you might not want to tell people that because you're like in the hospital not listening to your daughter, but okay. And she called me this particular day and she said, the doctor said that I should go see a nutritionist. Do you think that I should go? And I'm like, you've had diabetes for 25 years. No one ever referred you to a nutritionist? And she's like, no. Just kind of matter-of-factly, like, why would I ask her that? Like, why would somebody refer her to a nutritionist? And that was such an aha light bulb moment for me because it made me realize that all of the years that we had complained to her about the way that she was eating and the things that she was saying, we assumed that it was stubbornness. And not just as a family, it was even so far as even her doctors assumed that she knew stuff that they never told her. I remember one particular time we all sat around and we kind of laughed that her doctor fired her. She actually got a letter from her doctor, and the letter told her that she had to find a new primary care physician because her primary care physician did not want to be responsible for her non-compliance. And we kind of laughed about it at the time, but when I started a career in health and fitness and now know more about the healthcare system, I think about how horribly tragic that was. Instead of taking the opportunity to actually educate her, which the doctor never did, or even referring her to, because this was before the nutritionist thing, right? She never gave her a referral or anything. She actually just told her, I'm not going to take responsibility because you don't know what to do. So all the times that my mother would say things like, oh, just give me that Pepsi because everything makes my sugar go up, right? And just give me the cake, take the icing off of it. Right? If you know an older person with diabetes, you probably heard this before. She actually was doing that because she literally did not know. She had no idea what she should be eating, how she should be eating, how she should be moving, that could actually affect her health. And what I've learned and what I've really dedicated the last 20 years of my life to is teaching people that exercise and food is medicine. You can literally use it as a prescription to both treat and heal yourself. And I hope that with the information that I shared in this book, that it will empower people to really take that seriously. It's not just about fitting inside of a size 6 pants or looking good in the mirror. It really is about your health, because being obese is a symptom to what is going on internally. And if you fix what's going on internally, the weight will happen. And that is, I think, what people miss. It is a hormonal imbalance. It's not just about calories in, calories out, right? We know this. My journey of finding the techniques of this book was me actually realizing that. So I've been overweight at different points in my life. I think my largest weight was when I got pregnant with my first son. So I don't think I share this in the book, but what led me to health and wellness as a career, when I graduated high school, and I probably, as long as I could remember, the funny thing is that I always wanted to be a writer. And when I went to Cooperative Arts and Humanities High School here in New Haven, and I majored in creative writing. And when I graduated, I went to Albertus Magnus College, and I majored in English and minored in psychology. And I definitely knew that that's what I wanted to be. And then I got pregnant with my first son. And when I was about 6 months pregnant, I suffered from a condition called pelvic symphysis. It's the collapse of the pelvic bone. So when your pelvic bone collapses, what happens is the nerve function from your brain does not reach your leg. So I could push myself up to a standing position, but when my brain tells my legs to pick up and walk, they literally would not move. So when I got pregnant, I was 115 pounds. When I gave birth, I was 198 pounds. And I gained about 50 of those pounds in the last 3 months of my pregnancy. I would like to say that most of that was baby, but he was only 7 pounds, 8 ounces. And at my 6 weeks appointment, I was still 186 pounds. But one thing that I knew is I knew that I did not want to stay that way. And so I put a lot of energy. We didn't have the internet during that time, so my husband was kind enough to go to the library and get me books so I would have something to do in the day. And I read about nutrition, about exercise. I put together a program for myself, and I lost weight. And other women in my community started noticing that I lost weight and started asking me to help them create plans, and I was doing that. And what led me to fitness was I was helping a friend of mine, and I was recreating a plan. Some people here know Maida. And she looked at me and she's like, you know what, Mubaraka, you're pretty good at this. You should become a personal trainer. And then my first response was, you can make money doing this? It wasn't even, idea of health and fitness as a career wasn't anywhere on my radar. And so I began to look into it, which led me to completely abandon English and psychology and transfer to Southern Connecticut State University and major in exercise science. So that was actually where, when I saw that it was a way that I could actually help people and it was something that I really loved doing, that led me to a career which now is definitely my lifelong passion, my lifelong, and I say it's my passion because I say this to my husband all the time, and I say, you know, it's something that if I had $1 million and I never had to worry about a bill again, I would probably call somebody up to teach them a boot camp for free. I probably would. I like burpees. So in this whole process of weight loss and weight gain, as we always do, I think that one of the myths that people have about most health and fitness coaches is that, oh, they never struggle with weight. And for me, that is certainly not true. Not only do I struggle with weight, but my entire goal is really to avoid this history of health problems in my family. My mother had diabetes. Her mother and her father had diabetes. They all passed away, which I would consider relatively young, 65 and younger, right? My grandfather I did have a grandfather who lived to be 80. On my father's side, my father died at 55 from a stroke induced by high blood pressure. He didn't know he had high blood pressure. His mother had a stroke. In fact, when I traced my DNA through Ancestry.com, and I went through there and I found probably about a half a dozen death certificates of relatives. And the interesting thing that I find is on my father's side, every death certificate that I found, the death was related to stroke, except for one who was an uncle who had a rare kidney disease. But everybody else, it was related to show the strength of how the genetics of high blood pressure runs on that side of the family. I have 3 living aunts. One has had multiple strokes due to high blood pressure. One of my aunts who passed, she died from an aneurysm. My other aunts who are alive all have high blood pressure. That's how strong the genetics are in my family, and that is what I think about every time that I go running or when I'm choosing food that goes in my mouth, is the idea. What makes me, and what I hope to encourage other people to look at as well, is that it's not just about how you move, it's also about what you put in your mouth and how you eat, and it can literally change your health. High blood pressure and diabetes are both preventable illnesses, right? We used to call them the triad of diseases. We had all of these names, and then probably about 8 years ago, the medical profession really made intentional effort to change high blood pressure, heart disease, and diabetes to preventable illnesses, to inform people that your lifestyle choices can prevent this. As they say, your genetics is the gun, but your lifestyle is the trigger. You have a choice in everything that you do on a daily basis, whether or not you're going to pull that trigger. So let me explain a little bit more about the specifics of the book. So the 4 techniques that I talk about in this book is ketogenic eating, intermittent fasting, angiogenesis inhibiting food, and high intensity interval training. Many of those things you probably heard about before, and they're all over everywhere. But one of the reasons why I felt like I wanted to write this book is that the internet lies. And I really felt like people were following things as a trend and really thinking about it in a very shallow way. So when I started reading and researching and reading the studies about how these things actually affect your health, it is far exceeding your weight loss. I mean, the effects of it far exceeds your weight loss. One of the things about ketogenic eating in particular, what brought me to it is my weight went up again, and I started doing all the things that I tell people to do. I started, eating lean meats and having some whole grains and exercising for an hour a day for 5 days a week. And I think this was probably leading up to my 40th birthday. And I did something really out. This is a complete side note. So what I did for my 40th birthday, because goals are important to me, and that's how I keep myself motivated, is I decided that for my 40th birthday, I'm 43 by the way, that I would get Army fit. I have no intentions of joining the Army. However, I said, if I wanted to join the Army, what would they require a 40-year-old to do? And so they have a certain amount of push-ups. They have how fast you should run. They have all of these things that you should do. And so that's what I did all the way up to my 40th birthday. And on my 40th birthday, I was Army fit. I was running a 6-minute mile. I was doing the push-ups in the amount of time. And I was still overweight. And so this whole calories in, calories out thing just wasn't working. Like, if that was true, the 1 to 2 hours a day should have reflected on the scale, right? And so I was really frustrated, and I tell people I'm stubborn, I'm persistent, and I am very dedicated. And I think that for most people who had been in my situation, they probably would have gave up. But I was like, there's no way that being overweight is unavoidable. There has to be something else. And I actually didn't come across ketogenic eating from the internet. I came across it in my sports nutrition book from college. So I literally went back to the book, and I was just like flipping through. And I came across the chapter, and then I went in my notes, and it reminded me of conversations that we had inside of that particular exercise and nutrition class. And I decided to give it a try. And I began to research more and more about it, and I'm like, this is really not a fad. It literally has been around for 100 years. Why don't we know this? Like, why don't we know that you can literally reverse your diabetes using this method? Why don't we know that they are doing studies on its effect on cancer and Alzheimer's and dementia? And like, why isn't this common knowledge? Like, this is really important. And I won't get into conspiracy theories, but there is no money in people healing themselves. I'll just leave it there. And then I began, so just a quick, in the book I have a whole breakdown of kind of like how ketogenic eating was discovered, what it was initially used for. It was actually initially used for to treat children with epilepsy. And children who were prescription resistant. So they had epilepsy, but they were not responding to medication. And a doctor, he claimed to cure 80% of his patients by having them to fast for 30 days. And what researchers did, once they saw his results, they were like, well, what is it about fasting that cures the epilepsy? And they discovered that fasting created a ketogenic state. And then they were like, okay, well, we know if people don't eat carbohydrates, then they can create a ketogenic state and actually eat, because like not eating really isn't sustainable. Right? You can't really not eat for the rest of your life. Well, you could, but your life would be much shorter. So, and that was like the discovery of ketogenic eating, and it just began to kind of like evolve into additional studies, right? So we know that we still need lots more research on it. My particular interest, which I'm hoping they do more research, is ketogenic eating and strength training. Well, research we need more. But we have research on it for so many amazing things. Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, Angelman syndrome, dementia, Alzheimer's, cancer. It can positively affect your body to both prevent and treat all of these illnesses. Intermittent fasting works in a much similar way as ketogenic eating. When your body begins to produce ketones, you literally can reset your metabolism within 3 days. And so when I talk about why I felt the information that I hope to clarify in this book, like often you hear, this is an example, you will hear people say, I'm gonna go on a juice fast to detox, right? True detox is cellular detox. It's called autophagy. It is when your cells, literally on the cellular level, they actually recycle, reuse, and reduce. They recycle themselves, and it is attributed to mice living 300% longer. Now, we don't know if it's going to make humans live 300% longer. I don't even know if there will be a researcher around to determine that. However, we know that it is a part of the regeneration and renewal of cells. Autophagy only happens when your insulin level is lowered. It does not happen in the presence of a high insulin. So if you think that you are detoxing by having fruit juice every day, you're actually preventing autophagy. And people, they use the word detox as a catchphrase, not understanding the physiology behind it, right? So the benefits that intermittent fasting gives you, the benefits that ketogenic eating gives you, all of those benefits, physiologically, the reason why it's happening is because your insulin level is lowered. I have literally had clients on this program to reverse their diabetes. I've had clients, I'm thinking of one in particular, she started the program with taking insulin shots 3 to 5 times a day. At the end of the 40 days, she told me she had taken her insulin shot 3 times. 3 times in 40 days, just by changing her eating, right? And she admitted to me that she wasn't really implementing the exercise part, which is fine. The way that the program is designed is I take 4 very well-researched methods And even if you do one of them, your health will improve. If you can put all 4 of them together, you can quadruple the effects of it. But ketogenic eating, intermittent fasting, and what makes this program a little different is I talk about angiogenesis inhibiting foods. That is a type of research that is being studied for cancer. And I am not proposing that my method will prevent or cure cancer. Just clarify that. I'm not saying I cure cancer. But I predict that angiogenesis inhibition is going to take a very similar route as ketogenic eating. It began as something in the medical community for medical problems, and we then see later on that it is very effective for lowering weight and maintaining weight. So there is a researcher, his last name is Lee, Lii, and he has done research how it works for, particularly for weight loss. We know that angiogenesis inhibiting compounds have been used to treat cancer for at least the last 50 years. This is the way they actually treat cancer, by making these compounds inside in medication. And his research led him to this because he said, we're doing this after people get cancer. What can we do to actually prevent people from getting cancer? Is there natural ways to do this? Let's look at foods. And what they did is they did a study and they compared foods to actual cancer medication. And many foods had more angiogenesis inhibition than the medications themselves. So what angiogenesis is think of it's the highway that it's capillaries that's feeding the tumor, right? And when you have angiogenesis inhibiting, when a cancer tumor is growing, it's a lot of capillaries, right, going to feed that tumor. When they do angiogenesis, when they introduce angiogenesis inhibiting compounds, it reduces the amount of blood going to that tumor, it reduces those capillaries to cause the tumor to shrink. Now, what they did as a side to the study, so they know that this is, this is well researched within the cancer community, is they actually discovered that fat cells and cancer cells are both fed the same way. They're both fed through angiogenesis. And so they took a mouse who was overweight, an obese mouse, and they gave him angiogenesis inhibiting compounds. The mouse shrunk in weight and size, back to the size of a normal mouse weight. They took the compounds away, the mouse gained weight again. They did it 3 times to assure that it was the angiogenesis inhibiting compound that was causing the weight loss. And every time they introduced the compound, the mouse lost weight. So we learned 2 things from this research. 1, angiogenesis inhibiting compounds can help with weight loss, getting down to a normal weight. But number 2, it must be consistent. And so in the chapter about angiogenesis inhibiting, I give people kind of like, these are the things that you need to try to have on a daily basis, right? So one of the really interesting studies, a separate study in this one, was particularly on teas, and teas with angiogenesis inhibiting compounds. So the 3 teas that have the highest angiogenesis inhibiting compounds is Earl Grey, Japanese Sencha, and Jasmine Dragon Pearl. Earl Grey actually had the highest angiogenesis inhibiting compound, more than Dragon Pearl and Sencha. But the interesting thing was, when they combined Dragon Pearl and Sencha, it exceeded Earl Grey. So to optimize the effect of the teas, you want to have those teas actually together, right? Other things that are angiogenesis inhibiting are, and we know these things and we know them to be healthy foods: onions, garlic, broccoli, kale, all of these things that we're like, oh, this is healthy food, this is, right? It really is, and unfortunately, most people don't eat enough of them. right? 70% of Americans don't eat 5 to 7 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. Like, it's literally not just about, oh, we need some extra vitamin C. The amount of benefit for fruits and vegetables in particular, so you will also find that I talk about how you need to limit sugar, right? You're not just limiting carbohydrates, you're limiting sugar. One of the things that I really, really try to get across, if you follow me on social media, probably once a month you'll see me posting, stop drinking juice. No juice. Juice is the most unnatural way for you to consume any fruit or vegetable. Don't juice. Orange juice, I don't know where the campaign came from that you're supposed to have orange juice in the morning. That's like the worst thing that you can do for your insulin level, the worst thing that you can do for your body. It's something, particularly when you think about diabetes and you think about cancer, cancer cells love sugar. And when you are eating all of the sugar, you're just encouraging it to grow, if you have a propensity towards it, right? So actually eating whole, and I really, in understanding food and how to do ketogenic eating and intermittent fasting in a healthy way, eating vegetables is a huge part of it, right? So I think that people are attracted to keto because they see asparagus wrapped bacon and burgers and right? They see all of these fatty foods. I can have bologna and I can have this isn't the healthy way to do. This is if you're just going for the weight loss, right? You don't care about your health, right? So I'm gonna have all the nitrates. We don't want to do that. You really do want to eat whole foods. It is not, there's no such thing as a keto food. I get asked this a lot. Bless their heart, I have some wonderful, wonderful friends who every time they invite me over their house, they're like, what keto foods can I make for you? And I'm like, food, right? So there's no such thing as keto foods. Ketogenic eating is really just changing the proportion of what you are eating in whole foods. It is eating chicken and fish and shrimp and lobster and all of the proteins that you can think of. It's eating broccoli and kale and zucchini and eggplant. It's literally eating the foods that we have in the store. Again, you can't make money off of teaching somebody that they can use ketogenic eating to affect their health because there's nothing to sell them. It's like, go to the store, go shopping, right? And just stay out the bread aisle. That's it. You might want to stay at the ice cream aisle too. So it makes such a difference, not just on weight. So I'm going to open up to questions, but I just want to say, with these techniques, I want weight to be the side effect of it. I want people to really understand how this completely changes your health and your health outcome. And you'll look good as fitness is not a look, it's a state of being. Looking good is just a side effect, right? So the weight is gonna come, but understanding what's happening to your body while you're going through this process is super important. So I'll talk for a minute. So does anybody have any questions or comments?
I have a question because I got your book about a week ago and I love it. I thought intermittent fasting is working for me. So the first thing you could drink in the morning you were saying is water or tea or coffee. So my question was, I also make like chicken bone broth. Do I have to wait the 16 hours or would that count as a?
Okay, so research-wise, I will tell you about the research. Research is, when they research intermittent fasting, it's done in two ways. It's done one with completely nothing to eat, and then there is a second research that's going on about taking in less than 500 calories during that time of fasting. So, technically, yes. As long as it's not, as long as it's not like loaded with lots of oils and calories and things like that. So it's really about what are the nutrients inside of the actual broth. But bone broth is awesome. I highly recommend it. I think that it's a great way also to, as something to break your fast with, because it's very soothing on the digestive tract.
What about being
So, Ketogenic eating does not support a vegan lifestyle, but it does support a vegetarian lifestyle. So that is a great question because a lot of people are under the impression that if you are eating in a ketogenic manner, that you have to eat meat or animal products. The reason why vegetarian but not vegan is you cannot get the protein that you need on a vegan based lifestyle. So if you eat eggs and dairy products, then you can certainly do a vegetarian keto program. So meat is, it's an option. It is not mandatory part of ketogenic lifestyle, which is another reason why periodically inside of my coaching groups, I will challenge people to go a week on keto, vegetarian keto, right? Increase the amount of vegetables that you're eating. The main part about ketogenic eating really is the amount of fat that you're eating. You have to eat more fat so that your body can create ketones. This is also a mark. I know this is like so extra for me. I have to ask one question. She's all extra about it. One of the differences, or one of the things that I think is mixed up a lot is people say, well, keto is just another way of doing Atkins. Not really. So let me give Dr. Atkins his props. I think that Dr. Atkins, his intentions was to teach people keto, but he did not focus on the fat. Your health outcome is going to be different trying to do a low carb and a low fat program versus trying to do a high fat program. Your body literally needs the fat to convert into ketones so that you can have all of these beneficial health effects. If you are doing a low fat, low carb program, some of the physical differences that you'll feel is that you'll definitely have less energy. One of the things that is a negative effect of doing that is that your body will begin, because your body is kind of like trying to use, now it doesn't have the fat, it doesn't have the carbs, it's going to try to convert protein into energy, which is much harder for your body to do. And when your body doesn't have enough protein, it's literally going to eat your own muscles. And you never want that to happen. The goal for any health program, weight loss program, is for you to maintain as much muscle as you possibly can, because for every pound of muscle that you lose, your metabolism will decrease by 50 calories a day. The reverse is also true. For every pound of muscle that you gain, your metabolism will increase by 50 calories a day. One of the beautiful things about ketogenic eating, which I particularly love, having a fitness lifestyle, is you lose almost exclusively fat. Your muscles is not touched, right? And when I did my program, just personally, this is what the research showed, but personally, I actually monitor my body fat percentage and throughout the process, and you don't lose muscle. You literally lose fat. It's one of the only weight loss techniques where it targets specifically your excess fat and not your body muscle. Did I answer your question? Okay. And a little extra something.
So even with the vegan, you keep like the protein powder?
Say that again?
Like, so with vegan, like not even like protein powder, there's no way to...
So the thing about trying to do keto vegan is that you're going to find that you will rely on lots of processed foods, which I would not recommend. I always consider processed food as like, that's just like extra. Like you can technically, you can do protein powder and tofu. I mean, technically you can, maneuver your macronutrients, but you're gonna find a really high reliance on
Tofu still processed?
Yeah, you're gonna find a high reliance on processed foods.
Can you drink the keto protein shakes?
So again, like I really don't think there's a such thing as like a keto protein shake. They're just kind of like using it as marketing. It's really just like a protein shake, and they added some MCT oil to it, and you can probably get that cheaper if you just buy the two separately. But again, I'm a huge advocate of eating actual food, right? Protein shakes are supplement. They should supplement your diet if you need to, if you're at work and you can't cook, or you know you're just super busy today and this is a part of what you need to do today. But again, make it a supplement. Really get used to, because whole foods have a complete nutrient profile, right? And when they're eaten together, this is one of the reasons why I tell people don't juice stuff, right? You're taking the fiber away from the sugar. You're multiplying the amount of sugar. You're multiplying the vitamins, but you're also multiplying the amount of sugar that you're taking in your body. Nature did not intend for you to sit down and drink the juice of 5 oranges in 2 minutes, right? It normally would take you 5 minutes to eat 1 whole orange, right? So that's not the way it's meant to consume.
Milk and dairy is okay.
Yes.
What about pasta, carbs, minimal, or?
Nope. So ketogenic eating, if we talk about the technicals, right? When you're first starting, no more than 20 grams of carbs per day, like total. And you have to remember, vegetables have carbs in it too. So all of your carbohydrates are actually going to come from the vegetables, right? Definitely no bread, no pasta. I'm sorry, I got Diane offered to get y'all Subway sandwiches, but I was like, no. Let's get them some veggie sticks. But the interesting thing that I have discovered in this whole journey is if you pay attention to how food make you feel, you actually enjoy it. So here's the interesting thing about being in a state of ketosis. A lot of people who have never done it and who talk against it, they say things like, oh, it's going to mess up your relationship with food. It's not good because it's going to make you think certain things is bad. The interesting thing is that because it changes your hormones, so it balances the leptin and ghrelin, which is the hormones that tell you that you're full or you're hungry. When you actually sit down to eat, you eat with intention. You actually create a better relationship with food because you're not eating off emotion. You're not eating because, oh, I'm so craving this, because your hormones are everywhere. You actually can choose foods that are going to help you in your health, in your weight loss journey. You're actually creating a better relationship with food. And so you'll find, once you start paying attention to that some things are more tradition, right? So sometimes people ask me, like, you don't miss like bread or this or that. And I said, one of the things that I realized on keto is I really don't like bread. Like, I just ate it because you're supposed to have bread with a sandwich. But and every so often I do have my flex days, right? And I'm like, okay, today I'm just gonna eat whatever I want. And when I eat bread, I'm like, this actually feels kind of weird, right? So I found that there were certain things that I was just eating because that's what you're supposed to eat, right? And you don't discover this when you are just eating because the food is there, or eating because, oh my God, I'm so hungry, I'm starving, or I'm craving. You don't discover this until you actually create a healthy relationship with food and understanding that food is there to serve you, right? That food that you're choosing is that's what you're making your body from. What is the state of your body that you would like, what state of health would you like that food to create? And so when you think about that, and you're like, yeah, do I want to look like a piece of salmon, or do I want to look like a donut? Right? That's what you're making. More questions?
So when we put our body into ketosis from eating the way we should, is that something we can do you stay in keto? I didn't finish the book, I have distractions at home like I do here. So is that something you say on long term, or is this
So it's completely up to you. I believe that ketogenic eating and intermittent fasting is a tool to restore your health. If you choose for this to be a lifestyle, then you can certainly do that, right? We have absolutely no research that says that ketogenic eating has negative long-term effects, right? I believe as of now, the longest research study is about 10 years that they've they've been able to like study people on ketogenic eating. So we don't have a 30-year or 50-year study. We have about a 10-year study. And it's completely up to you. But I also tell people that it's also a way for you to know that you have this health tool, right? So say you do the program 40 days, you lose your weight, and now you're like, you know what? I actually love bread, right? So you go back to eating. But then you may discover, you know what? I realize that if I am getting sick, I can use intermittent fasting and ketogenic eating to make myself better. I realize that if I'm having a problem with my digestive system, that I can go back and use this tool to heal myself. If I am, the doctor told me that I'm having problems with my sugar level, I can go back and I can heal myself. So it'll be a tool that you'll always have. What I hope that I really conveyed in the book is helping people understand the physiological things that happens in your body so that you'll know when you need to activate that. To me, it really is like having a superpower, right? Like, okay, activate keto mode. Yes.
Talk more about how intermittent fasting helps.
Yes. So intermittent fasting, I mean, if you're on the internet, it's gotten all of this rage, right? But it's something that has literally been in existence for thousands and thousands of years. We know that everybody from spiritual gurus to prophets have used fasting as a means of spiritual renewal, physical renewal. And the interesting thing is that when you see how it literally transforms what's happening in your body, it makes you want to do it more, right? So there's a couple of things that it does. One, the main purpose that intermittent fasting achieves is it reduces your insulin level. And I talked about that a little bit earlier, that the insulin really is a domino hormone, right? When it's raised, it kicks off a whole bunch of hormones that can damage your body, and when it lowers, it can kick off a whole bunch of hormones that can benefit your body. Keeping that insulin level low, we have an epidemic now of high insulin. We know we have children now with type 2 diabetes, right? So when you're fasting, the first thing that happens is it lowers your insulin level. So that's within the first 12 hours. So important note, it's not fasting if it's less than 12 hours, right? Because it takes 12 hours for your liver to actually deplete its glycogen level. Then the next thing that happens once your insulin and glucose is lowered is it now begins, now this is when the domino starts happening. It then triggers your leptin and ghrelin to balance out, right? So ghrelin makes you feel like, oh my God, I'm hungry all the time. But anytime your glucose is raised, then your ghrelin is going to tell you that you're hungry. So if you lower that, you're not going to feel hungry. So a question that I get a lot is, do I need to count calories? The biggest thing that I have dealt with in coaching people along this program is reminding them to eat. Not really, don't eat this, because they're like, but I'm not hungry. I'm like, but you need nutrients, right? Grab some vegetables, grab a vegetable stir fry, something, but you need nutrients, right? And the reason that happens is because, again, leptin and ghrelin is then balanced, right? So after about 16 hours, without food, your body is now starting to produce those ketones. Like, we know ketones do a couple of things. One, we know, they used to tell us, or they made the theory that, oh, you can't go without glucose because your brain needs glucose. But now we have the research that proves that the brain actually functions 25% better on ketones than it does on glucose. And what that connects me to, and I'm like, so that's why spiritual gurus use fasting, right? They get some brain clarity, they can think at a higher level because their body is working off of ketones. And it really all goes back to kind of like that insulin level. If we can lower that, then you can now kickstart autophagy. So we know that after 24 hours of fasting, autophagy kicks up. When it comes to weight loss, lipolysis is the technical term for fat burn. The sweet spot, as they call it, for fat burn using intermittent fasting is actually not 16 hours, it's actually 18 to 20 hours. So they talk about, so in the research, they looked at lipolysis and they saw like between the hours of 18 and 20, there's a huge dip. And then after 24, it kind of like levels out. After 72 hours, it pretty much levels, right? So when you're talking using the intermittent fasting, because some people think, oh, the more the better. Hey, if I can do 24 hours, I can do 48. If I can do 48, I can do 7 days, right? I've actually seen that, oh, the 7-day fasting group. And let me also too say the warning with the 7 days. So we know a couple of things about intermittent fasting is, one, what we're trying to do now, when I say we, I mean like people who are proponents of it, is we're trying to really get people to understand that intermittent fasting is anything less than 24 hours. 24 hours and above, we're gonna call that extended fast, right? So when it comes to the benefit of fasting, weight loss, 18 to 20 hours is the sweet spot. If the goal for you is, some bodybuilders use it like to build muscle, after 24 hours of fasting, your testosterone level raises. A man's testosterone level can raise as much as 1,300%, and a woman's testosterone level can raise, not in a negative way, but it can raise as much as 300%, right? After 24 hours. So sometimes bodybuilders actually use this as a way of building muscle. They'll fast for 24 hours and then do like a massive weight training workout and then eat, right? And the interesting thing is that you would think like, oh, I'm not gonna have enough energy. Actually, I tell people only on the third day you start losing energy, honestly. The first 2 days is really all in your mind. Because your body is still working off of the carbohydrates, the foods, everything is still working. The other thing that happens when you fast, we know that at 24 hours, that's when autophagy really kicks in, but 3 days is the max. Autophagy pretty much evens out after 3 days. There's no detoxification benefit after 3 days. Extended fast beyond 3 days is really not encouraged. We don't have any research to show that it actually is beneficial in any way. And in fact, the research that we are starting to see shows that it can permanently damage your metabolism. So if your goal is weight loss, you don't want to do a 7-day fast, right? You want to kind of like max out. But then the other thing, and when we talk about research just in this particular area, the research that needs to be done is the process of refeeding. Like when you break your fast, what are some of the things that you need to be eating? In my non-research way, I suggest that you start off with vegetables and things that are high density nutrients. Definitely don't want to do intermittent fasting and then end it with a donut, right? Reverse everything that you just did. So in intermittent fasting, technically, you can do it for however long you like. There's no kind of like, oh, I can only do intermittent fasting for a month. It is something that is certainly sustainable, right, to do on a daily basis. The only caution that I tell people about doing intermittent fasting on a daily basis is remember that your leptin and ghrelin levels are going to make you think that, oh, I'm not really that hungry. So you have to eat intentionally. You have to make sure like, oh, I'm not going to just go grab 2 slices of bacon and then I feel full. You want to make sure, okay, I'm getting my vegetables in, even if it's in small portions or whatever you feel like you need to eat. But you have to make sure that you're refeeding yourself nutrients and nutrient-dense food. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Can I ask a personal advice question?
Absolutely.
My baby sister, I'm thankfully pretty healthy and pretty relatively sane, not always. But she's my beautiful baby sister who used to be just gorgeous and then weighed 250 pounds and is having all kinds of trouble. And she and her husband, who also loves to cook and bake like crazy, they did a 2-week Dr. Oz study and felt so much better. Their blood pressure went down. They didn't need other medications, but then they didn't do it anymore. So it's like, I don't know, when I say something to her, she's saying, oh, it's because you think I'm not beautiful. And that's not it at all. It's because I want to be healthy. And I don't know, I've kind of given up talking to her because she back off.
My suggestion for people, when you have people in your family that you are really concerned about their weight, is one, know that everybody's weight is their own personal journey. No matter how much you love somebody, and I have sisters too, that I would love for them to be on keto, but they keep rejecting me. I suggest a couple of things. Number one, don't tell them they need to lose weight. That's the first thing. The second thing that I would recommend is make it a part of just kind of like the normal thing that you talk about, right? It's not about them personally. It's about, hey, look, I read this article that had this research on all the benefits of intermittent fasting. Oh my gosh, this is really interesting to me. Here, let me share it with you, right? So you're just kind of just making it a part of your conversation. Oh, you know what? Before our Thanksgiving dinner, the whole family should just go around, walk around the block, or, you know, make it a part of the lifestyle with them. And initially you might get pushback, you know, I'll tell you definitely from personal experience. But I think that if it just becomes normal and it's just kind of like, that's just, they can expect it, and it's not about you, and it's not about only when you talk to her. Share the information with your brother-in-law, share it with your son, share it with, like, so that she sees that this is just the conversation. This is just about us being healthy as a family. It's not about just her. Because everybody who is thin is not always healthy. Right. It is something that is actually, so we have a term that we call, well, my term, I don't know if other trainers use it, but I call it a skinny fry, right? Those are people who, they look thin, they are in the healthy range on BMI, but when I test their body fat, it's over 30%. These are the people that can eat anything that they want, so they don't exercise. And they sit on the couch and Netflix and chill all the time, right? Because they're not physically moving, being thin. And it also reminds me of, I talked a lot about my mother's health issues, but the interesting thing to know about my mother is that she wasn't overweight. She got diabetes, she was not. My mother was 5 feet, and she probably, before she had her stroke, maybe 120 pounds, 130 pounds, right? She was not an overweight woman. Obesity actually, for her side of the family, most of them are not obese. It's not something that it runs in a family. But she also did not eat in a healthy manner, right? I tell people, like, health was mentioned as I was growing up about the same amount of times as every other Chinese word, ever. Right? It was not a part of our conversations unless we were talking about who was going to inherit diabetes or who was going to inherit high blood pressure. But I can remember those conversations and, you know, my sisters talking, and I knew that in my mind, I just was like, it ain't gonna be me. It ain't gonna be me. I don't know what I gotta do. It ain't gonna be, right? I always knew from a very young age, there has to be a way for me to avoid this, right? And I used to, just in my own way, I started running before school when I was about 14, right? And I was like, okay. I specifically remember it was an article in Shape magazine that talked about calories in versus calories out. And ever since I read that article when I was 14, I've been running. And I use that as an example because you never know what that one thing might be that sends off the light bulb, right? Something that you think is like, you know, that's not really that significant, but it might be that one thing that make that person say, you know what? I'll tell you a story that someone told me once, and I thought it was tell this story, and I thought it was actually quite profound, because as a health coach, I'm always very curious when I meet people who used to be significantly overweight and then they lose weight, and like, what was the thing? And this young woman, she said to me, I was at a speaking engagement, and she was my, I don't know, my host for the day, and she was telling me that she used to be significantly overweight, and she was a healthy weight. And I asked her, I said, what was that one aha moment? And she said that years had passed, and her doctor was telling her, you need to lose weight, you have high blood pressure, you need to lose weight. And she was like, and then one day she went into the doctor, and the doctor looked at her, and he said to her, have you ever been to a senior living facility? And she's like, yeah. And he said, have you ever seen anybody your size? And she said she thought about it, and she was like, no. He said, because they don't live that long. So if you want to be here for your kids, you need to do something about your weight. She said she went into her car and she cried for an hour, and then that was her aha moment. Having diabetes wasn't her aha moment. Her doctor putting on high blood pressure medicine was not her aha moment. Everybody has something different. Like, some people are like, well, if you got all of these illnesses, like, why didn't you just, like, wake up, right? We have these conversations when we're watching things like My 600-Pound Life. Like, did you not see the scale when you were 400 pounds? Like, what's going on? But everybody has something else something that is going to be that, hopefully that thing. And you never know, it might be an article, it might be a lecture, it might be a book. It might be just that one little thing. But I think as families and breaking kind of like an African American community, we talk a lot about breaking generational curses, right? Health is one of those things, right? There's a whole lot of things that go into bad health for African Americans, but part of it is like this traditional lifestyle, right? That we aren't taught how to eat for health. For so long, Black people just ate to survive, right? If you're starving, pig feet look pretty good, because that was all you was getting for that day, right? And so we didn't look at it, but now we are at a point where we're like, hey, we have to break this tradition of eating that results in bad health, or lack of movement that results in bad health. And I think the way that we break that for everybody is really making it a lifestyle, right? Making it, just incorporating it into your family. And it doesn't even have to be like extreme things like, hey, let's everybody get a gym membership, even though we do be trying to get everybody a gym membership. It can be little things like, you know what, instead of us having a family movie night, we're gonna go bowling, because bowling is activity, right? Instead of us sitting down and playing Monopoly, we're gonna play Twister, right? What are the little things that you can incorporate into your family that is just gonna keep people active, right? So just little things like that. Making, it's Thanksgiving and we're actually going to do a 2-to-1 ratio of vegetables, right? If I make turkey, then I'm not going to just make collard greens. I'm going to make collard greens and a salad, or collard greens and some squash. Like, incorporating it into, it doesn't have to be huge. And if this is a complete side note, there's a little extra stuff, but especially if you have children or a family that's really resistant, again, you can't say, I am going to make everybody healthy, right? And never tell your kids that, because that's definitely a way of them not eating what you gave them. You just make it. I'm trying a new dish. Why don't you try this, right? I'm making a new way of making zucchini, right? Why don't you just try it, right? So for some reason, the word healthy actually turns people off. That should be our goal, but it really does. Any other questions? Okay. All right, thank you so much. So there's a couple things I have for you. I have an email list if you would like to sign up for an email list to get tips on a weekly basis and recipes. There's a piece of paper over there. If you don't have a book and you would like one, you can get a book. And I want to thank you guys again for coming and giving me a part of your evening. And I hope that this book and this guide will be beneficial and be a tool inside of your healthy living toolbox and help you on your journey to living a long, healthy, happy life that's full of joy.